I was born and raised between Concordia and Beloit, and my parents split up when I was in 6th grade, and then we moved to Salina and then to Holton. I went to high school in Holton. And with my work, I worked in a shop in Concordia, and then I've basically traveled most of my career all over the United States doing Boilermaker work. So in big, powerhouses and refineries and that type of work.
I grew up in a small town in California, in the Mojave Desert called Trona, California. And I was raised a Christian in a small hometown church, but I was that teenager that there was that 1% that thought, I'm going to do what I want to do because it's more fun, and I don't want to go down that road of being a devout Christian. So I kind of lost my way there for several years. And as I became older and had kids and stepkids, it became apparent to me that God needed to be 100% in my life. And then we found Beloit First Christian Church, and it's been amazing. And this testimony has come because of that.
This, what I refer to it as the episode situation, our testimony, but it's totally changed my life.
It was in 2009. I had been laid off from my job at Alston Power. They had some downsizing, and I was the last one hired, so I was one of the first one that went. So I was kind of at a crossroads. We had a kid that was a junior and one that had just graduated, so we had 2 more years of a child at home in school. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to school and start getting everything in line to get my nursing degree. So I had started taking classes in August, and I started to have some knee pain, and I thought, oh, it's just because I was out of shape and doing a lot of walking. The campus is kind of spread out. So I thought, well, you're just out of shape, let's keep going. And I ended up in the emergency room one weekend. This was the first time. My oldest son, my biological son, I was taking him to California to see my grandma and grandpa, his great-grandparents. And I'd ended up in the emergency room prior to that trip, and they had taken some fluid out, and they said it was just gout. So they started treatment on gout. I had a couple of injections, which kind of took the pain away, but it was still tolerable. And then that's when I started the classes a few weeks later. And then I was in my 3rd week of classes, and I couldn't get out of bed. The pain had come back, my knee was swollen, and I laid there. First it started out like I was just sick to my stomach and the flu, and then I noticed my knee was hurting a little bit, and that's when it all started. John came home, or I had called my doctor, and he said, you need to get here. There was no way I could drive. I was delirious. I think I was passing in and out up in my bedroom. I was upstairs. So John took me to Dr. Jordan in Concordia in a wheelchair. I do remember getting in a wheelchair, and he looked one look at my knee, and he said, we need to get you down to Wichita. There happened to be...
Salina.
Or Salina. I went to Salina. So John, Brice was gone, you were in...
Hastings.
So John took me down to Salina.
John called me, I was working in Hastings, which is another 120 whatever miles away. And so I left work and drove to Salina. I mean, in a period of few hours, she had gotten these large, really nasty blood blisters, is the only way I could describe them. She had one on her Achilles tendon and on her legs. And I didn't know what necrotizing fasciitis is, a flesh-eating staph infection. She had this in her knee, and it had been there long enough. She was starting to become septic with it, I guess. It was getting through her whole body. So I got there on a Friday night and talked to the doctor, and he said that they were going to operate in the morning on her knee. And at this point, she's pretty well out of it. So I called her mom, and I told Polly what the situation was. And so the following day, they operated, and I talked to the doctor, and he said, this is something that's always stuck in my head. I think he said 21 liters of water, I'm sure saline. They tried to wash her knee. once they got into the infection. And he said this, and this became a standard phrase. This is much worse than we thought. I don't know how many times I heard this, but anyhow, so he told me, he said, her knee is completely destroyed by this infection, and she's going to have a knee replacement. And I'm thinking, well, okay, you know, they do those all the time. This isn't that awfully bad, you know. Of course, you're hoping for the best. But anyhow, she just continued to decline. And through the weekend, because this was Saturday, through the weekend, she was totally delirious. I mean, screaming in pain. These sores started popping up on her body. So they're dumping massive amounts of antibiotics in her. I mean, 2-3 bags, just continual antibiotics in her. And Tuesday or Wednesday, they said, we're going to go back in there and see if we can cut some more of this infection out. So on Wednesday, they went in and operated again. After that surgery, he called Polly and me and said, once again, this is much worse than we thought. We're going to have to amputate her leg. And he said, this is not about saving her leg. This is about saving her life. And I don't even know if we can do that. And now it's sinking in how bad this is. I mean, I already knew it was bad, but doctors don't generally say that. So anyhow, well, this is a testimony to Jackie, how strong she is. When she came out of that surgery, the doctor had already told us. And they brought her back to the room, and she's just waking up, and Polly said, do you want to tell her, do you want me to tell her that they were going to amputate her leg? And I said, I'll do it. And she had a moment of clarity when she woke up, and she said, and I said, you know, Jackie, they're going to have to amputate your leg. And she said, well, at least it's not cancer.
I was so afraid I had cancer. So afraid.
Yeah. Anyway, so they scheduled the amputation for the next day. And we still had Levi, my biological son, was a junior in high school. And so I was running back and forth to Salina to make sure he was getting to school, and, you know, and John was still living at home. And so maybe 11 o'clock at night, I'm driving home. And right when I get to 8124 Junction, the doctor calls me, Dr. Daly, who did the amputation. And once again, I heard, you know, this is worse than we thought. I got a hold of a doctor that I went to college with that works in Wichita, and they're much better equipped to deal with what we're dealing with here. And I couldn't get a live flight, so they're packing her up right now to go by ambulance to Wichita. And I actually pulled off the road. Normally I don't do that, but I, you know, had a conversation with him, and he told me what hospital. And so I drove home, and it was getting close to midnight, but I called Polly, who was staying in a motel in Salina, which put her about an hour closer to Wichita, and told her what was going on. So somehow I went to sleep, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from Jackie. And they had already transported her, and she had gotten to Wichita. You want to talk about how your phone got there? Because that's...
I don't know how my phone got there. I'd been delirious. I'd been in the hospital. I'd been in the surgery, in the surgery room, operating room. I'd been back in my bed. I had no idea how my phone got there. Is this after I got to Wichita?
Yeah,
right?
after you got to Wichita.
So I'd been transported to Wichita in an ambulance. Had my old flip phone.
And
how did I know where it was at? How did it get there? I just don't know.
And you'd been delirious. I don't even know how she had the presence of mind to call me. You know, I was so shocked to get this, because, I mean, she was completely out of
because it wasn't a call Brice like our no phones we have now. It was, I had to dial it. So I remembered it. I dialed those teeny little buttons. I'm all doped up on whatever painkillers they had me on. So I call him, and apparently I had been contemplating doing away with myself, committing suicide, because the pain was so bad. I was ready to go.
So,
and I called Brice because I had some pain pills on my nightstand, I knew right where they were. I couldn't have told you anything else. I had my phone and my pain pills. That's all I needed was Brice to bring them to me. And that was my major plan.
So when she called me, she was crying, and she was in so much pain. And if local people have ever drove 81 highway from Salina to Beloit, it needs a lot of repair. And she was explaining to me every bump, how it would send a jolt of pain through her, and she's crying and telling me how much pain she's in. And of course, I'm crying. And I'm sitting on the bed, and she said to me, "If I give up, will you think I'm a quitter?" And I'm looking at those pain pills, and I instantly knew what she wanted. She hadn't said it yet. And there's enough light in our bedroom that, night light, there's light comes through the window from the yard light. And I'm looking at those pills, and I know what she's going to ask me, and it's terrifying me. And she asked me if I thought she would be a quitter if she gave up. And I said, "No, you're one of the strongest people I know." And she said, "Well, you've got to do something for me. And I'm looking at these pills. She says, "You've got to bring my pain pills down." And I remember my mind started racing, and I'm thinking, I'll lie and tell her I forgot them. They wouldn't let me in with them, whatever. And of course, we're both terribly upset. She was in so much pain that when she spoke a 2-3 syllable word, she had to break it into syllables because she couldn't say the whole word. And then she said to me, she said, you've got to bring those pills down to me. You're my only hope. And I don't think I've ever asked anybody to pray, maybe at a meal, because like I told you about my background. But I just said, "Will you pray with me?" And I was just begging God. I mean, these were my words. "God, please let the pain stop just for a minute. If not just for a minute, God, please let the pain stop just for a few minutes." And I'm crying, and I'm literally just begging God.
And I felt this wave go through me, and I said, "Oh, Brice, that was the most beautiful prayer I've ever heard."
And she hung up. And I remember thinking, and I'm still blubbering these words, "God, please let the pain stop just for a minute." And in this angel voice that I told you about, she couldn't even speak because of the pain. And like that, here's Jackie's beautiful voice going, "That's the most beautiful prayer I've ever heard." That quick. And then she hung up on me, which isn't the first time. And anyway, so I'm still crying, and I guess I'm still kind of begging God. And I'm sitting on my bed, and everything went black. And I lost my eyesight, I guess. That's the only way to describe it. And I started kind of freaking out because I couldn't see. And I immediately looked to the window because I know there's light coming through the window. And I looked at the alarm clock, and I couldn't see anything, just pure pitch black. And I could feel my behind on the bed. I could feel my body moving. I was opening and shutting my eyes, snapping them shut and yanking them open. Why can't I see? And it was the most pitch pure black that I've ever seen. You don't see anything. And then I felt like I was traveling. Things changed, time, space. It was truly kind of scary. And I felt like I was going kind of east and up. I was definitely going up. And I started to become afraid of this blackness. This blackness was overwhelming. I mean, the work I do, sometimes we get to spots where there is no light. This was, I can't even explain the lack of light, the absence of light. And I felt like I was going up. And like I said, time, I could tell things had changed, time, everything. I mean, it was kind of scary. And then I saw this light. And as I moved towards it, I became aware of what it was. At first, it was just a glow. And I saw these two hands like this. And Jackie was laying in those hands. And she went from here to here. And her hair, she had long hair, and it was all flowing out. And it was like a light coming out. She was dressed in white. And it was almost transparent white. And I don't know how long I looked at this. Like I said, time changed. It could have been 3 days. It could have been 3 seconds. I don't know. I was aware that time had changed. And I knew she was okay. I wasn't aware if she was alive or not, or if he was just holding her in his hands. And then all of a sudden, I mean, it took a while for me to get to that point, going through this black, but instantly I'm in my room, my eyesight's back, I'm sitting on my bed, I can see the pain pills, I can see the alarm clock, I can see the normal lights, and I'm in the same position I was in. And I'm sitting on the bed, and I'm pretty freaked out, to say the least. And I'm not a calm person, but I felt this calmness, and I felt it enter my head, and I could feel it about this fast moving through my head, and it came down to my torso, and it went down all the way to my fingertips, through my torso, and all the way to my toes. And I've never felt so calm in my life. And I think, Cliff, I said it to you, and you said love. And I'd never put that word on it, but most definitely, love is a good way to explain it. So I'm pretty freaked out. And I grabbed the phone, and I called Jackie. And her first thing she said to me was, "Oh, Brice, it was beautiful. You should have seen it. He held me in his hands." And then she said, "The colors. You should have seen the colors, Brice." And strangely enough, we didn't have a very long conversation. It was like, and then I immediately said, "I saw it, honey. I saw you in his hands, you know." And I kind of explained a little bit, and then we hung up and went to bed. And I don't even know how I went to sleep, because I don't sleep well on a good day. And I went to sleep. So in the morning I got up, and I had to get Levi to school and make sure things were going right. And I was driving to Wichita, and Jackie's mother called me, told me where she was at, which hospital to go to. And then she said, you're not going to believe what I saw. She said, I walked in Jackie's room, and it was Jackie sitting up eating breakfast with a big Jackie smile. Now keep in mind, she hadn't ate in days. I mean, just strictly IV. She's been delirious. And now she's sitting up talking and chatting, you know, just like nothing had happened. I wasn't too surprised because of what had happened the night before, but I didn't, you know, go into it. So I made it to the right hospital with Polly's help. And when I got to the room, Dr. Canderwall, the doctor that was taking over, was just coming out. And I introduced myself, and he said, "Well, Mr. Paulsen, this is much worse than we thought." And
That dreaded saying.
Yeah. He said, "We're going to amputate off at her hip today, later on today." Or higher up, I got the impression. Anyway, and also the antibiotics they were giving her in saline, we've got the tests back, and those antibiotics are not working on this particular bacteria, or whatever you want to call it. And I said, okay, you know. And I could see he's out of the room, and I'm looking, and I can see Jackie sitting up talking, and there was a nurse in there. So I went in the room, and I asked Jackie, I said, "Did you tell your mom about what happened last night?" And she said, "No, you tell her." So when I get done telling it, Polly's like, "Oh my goodness," you know, and Lonnie said, she said, "Mr. Paulsen, I'd like to speak to you outside." And so we went out, and she told me, she said, Jackie came in at roughly 1 o'clock, and we loaded her up with, and she Dilaudid and morphine and the whole plethora of narcotics. And she said we gave her everything we could give her, shy of overdose and killing her, because with this type of a wound, it takes a minimum of 48 hours to get on top of it with the drugs. The first minimum 48 hours are going to be terrible. And see, this didn't sink into me at the time, or I would have questioned her more. And then she just looks at me with that same smile. Well, I told her, she goes, she hasn't taken any drugs since. And this is 10 o'clock in the morning, because I had to drive up. She says she hasn't taken any pain medicine since. They told me they're going to amputate later that day. And then, I don't know, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I asked them, I said, well, when are we going to amputate again? And my understanding was they were going to take it off at her leg off at the hip. And they said, well, we're going to do it tomorrow. And so tomorrow came and went, and, well, we're going to do it tomorrow. Okay? They didn't amputate again, and apparently it didn't matter on the antibiotics. She healed. I mean,
The infection just left.
and it was miraculous. It's the only way to
It was
describe
miraculous, definitely. I think it brought Brice closer than he has ever been. It made me open back up to him and just accept everything from him. Instead of pushing it away, I could do it by myself. I don't need, and it's wanted me to get involved with the church. And when I went through years of depression over this. When I finally gave him my depression, it's better. I still have ups and downs, everybody does, but I had some pretty down
very down.
times, yeah. Still makes me sad to think about it because he took the time to save me and I still was unthankful. Wanted to know, why did you save me? He doesn't give you a written plan. Maybe that's just why he finally broke through my hard head and said, okay, this is what you were supposed to do all the time, all along, so let's get to it. And I really feel working through the youth group, I really feel I'm there for a reason. So this church has been awesome.
After this happened, I started praying a lot. One of the things I started trying to pray every time I ate, because I need to give thanks because I have something to eat. There's people that don't. I've been fortunate all my life. I've never really gone hungry.
But don't you think when we started really concentrating on a prayer 3 times a day, that it brought us closer?
Undoubtedly. And I think then I started, this was a life-changing experience.
It made us want to pursue God
Good point.
harder and more steadfast.
Yeah, less lackadaisical,
Yeah, you've got to make him a priority in your life because he sure makes you a priority. So why not pay it back? And this church and our experience have got us focused to do that.